Hi, and welcome to Play It Loud. I'm putting this together in memory of Bob Weir. And a lot of people, particularly in the UK, don't know who Bob Weir was. They might have looked in the papers, maybe seen on the news obituaries, but Bob Weir passed the majority of rock fans in this country by. In America, if you're even remotely interested in rock music, you'll know who he was. Bob Weir was an institution in America, an institution as part of the Grateful Dead. He was a hero. He played basically the same music with the same people for well over 50 years. He was a great rhythm guitar player. You can't say that about many rhythm guitar players. I would suggest that John Lennon's the only other one that comes to mind that had a significant influence on the sound of a band. Well, Bob Weir did that. Why did the UK not really get off on the Grateful Dead? I think it's because of the history and the difference between American bands and UK bands. The UK bands, headed by the Rolling Stones, but dozens underneath them, the Faces are a perfect example. They came out of the American blues background. For them, it was the Buddy Miles, the black blues tradition. In your face rock music, loud, often short, and I think that phrase fits, in your face, because that's not the way the American bands of the same era started. The American hippie bands who morphed into the 70s, they all came from a country and a folk tradition. The Byrds, folk clubs, well, Roger McGuinn was, Jefferson Airplane, folk clubs, certainly members came out of the folk clubs. The Grateful Dead, originally the Warlocks, came from a folk music tradition. Folk music, country music, maybe a little jazz, but no, blues didn't come into it. That wasn't their background. That wasn't what they were talking about. And that meant two different trees, two different ways of going about rock music. And it probably is why UK didn't get it. Americans lapped it up. Grateful Dead, in my opinion, started Americana. They were the people who took American traditional music and turned it into something extraordinary. Okay, so if you don't know the Grateful Dead, a little bit of history. Out of San Francisco in the 66, 67, I think. First two albums, really quite difficult. Not going to recommend them to you. I saw the Grateful Dead in the Lyceum in 72, and it was a different experience. Around that time, I'd seen the Floyd live, I'd seen David Bowie live, and both of them came at you. Both of those bands did. Grateful Dead in the Lyceum, there was no seating. It was all standing in those days. I think you could have got a ticket on the door. Didn't appear to me to be that full. Grateful Dead come on, set up, start playing. 2.5 hours later, they finished playing. Relatively quietly. It was a lot more subtle. It wasn't the way the English bands and rock bands came over. It was, we're here, we're playing, we enjoy it. If you enjoy it as well, that's great. If you don't, it's fine as well. They had a completely different attitude to the way they went about their music. I saw them again in the late 80s, I think it was, in Wembley Arena. Not so good. Terrible sound at the time, and I don't think they were on form. They, like a lot of people, they had their good days and their bad days, and that wasn't their best, so we'll pass on that one. But how'd you get into the Grateful Dead? I've got well over 100 Grateful Dead albums, and they're known to be a live band, not a studio band, and both both of those things cause a problem for people who don't know the Grateful Dead and don't know where to start. First of all, they made some great studio stuff. The American Beauty album and Working Man's Dead are always brought forward as being fantastic, and they are, but they're not the Grateful Dead. Of course they are. That's who they. But they're not how the Grateful Dead sounded throughout their career. It wouldn't be representative of their music. But then probably none of their studio albums would be. No, it wouldn't. Grateful Dead live band. So don't buy a best of Grateful Dead. There are a number of them. I've got one here, a double CD, and it's not that expensive, and it's got an awful lot of their studio stuff on it. So if you want to hear the Grateful Dead in the studio, this is a good way to start. But I'm going to say again, it's not where I would start. I'd go with this. Upside Down, yeah. Grateful Dead live, double CD. This gives an overview of the Grateful Dead from late 60s brightened up to 95. It goes from a track called St. Stephen to So Many Roads. St. Stephen was off of the Grateful Dead's famous live album from 1969, I think it was, and So Many Roads was one of the last live tracks that they ever recorded. And if that doesn't float your boat, there's a 4 CD version, not quite the same, the definitive live story 65 to 95. They're not expensive. They're a good way of getting into the Grateful Dead. They're not an easy band to... They don't do singles. Touch of Grey came into the American charts, I think, but they're not a listen to this, oh wow, that's tuneful, that's funky, that's... No. Grateful Dead are a little bit like jazz. You've got to sit down and listen to them, because the interplay between the people who played in the Dead was just extraordinary. And I'm going to come back to why I started this, because Bob Weir, their rhythm guitarist, fed that music, led them from one track to another. He had a huge influence on the Grateful Dead's music. Also wrote a lot of their songs. Looks Like Rain is a track that I'm particularly fond of, that I think he wrote. I'm not sure if he wrote Ripple. If you've never heard the Grateful Dead, you must listen to Ripple. It's a wonderful track. Okay, I won't say moving on, but I'm a vinyl man, as you know. You can get the live album, and I think it's still available. I think it's easily available. And if you can't get the live album on vinyl, you could try going to Discogs and picking this up. The Long Strange Trip. It's sadly out of print, but I think you can get hold of it. Amazon did video. They did something that you could get on your TV showing their version of the Grateful Dead story, and this is a soundtrack. And the reason I'm promoting it is because it has live and studio tracks. There's not a lot of point in reading them out, because I'm advertising to people who don't really know the Grateful Dead. Suffice to say that it has Ripple on it, which I've already mentioned, a truly wonderful track, and it gives a good indication of how the Dead sounded live. I've seen recently Paul McCartney and Pete Townsend both come out with glowing tributes to Bob Weir. Bob Weir was fabulous. He was still making music until a couple of months ago. We're going to miss him. Get something by the Grateful Dead, and when you do, play it loud.